I mean, somebody asked me the other day, what do you think the future looked like? And I was bastardizing the Orwell quote from 1984, and I said it's a laptop screen smashing you in the face forever. And I'm not sure that sitting in our offices glued to this screen is necessarily that healthy either. So somewhere in the middle, but I'm not quite sure how we get there.
No, because I'm sorry, Constantine.
No, go ahead, mate. Go ahead.
No, because it just seems to me that this way that we're living, it doesn't seem sustainable. If you go back to the 9 to 5, and it didn't seem, looking back on it, that it was particularly effective either. But people had done it for generations, therefore we carried on. Surely the next generation of innovators and people coming out of it are going, well, we've actually managed to break that now. We've seen that it doesn't work. Therefore, let's try this new way.
Well, I think we'll definitely have. I think one of the economic effects of this situation will be the relative growth of the virtual over the real, if you like. So the virtual economy over the real economy. So you'll see more cloud-based activity, more remote activity, and certainly if you think about contingency planning for businesses now, where they used to have warehouses full of desks that everyone could go to, that's gone now, hasn't it? So there's going to be a whole different way of thinking about how you plan for this kind of emergency or this kind of interruption, business interruption going forward. So I think there will be changes. And people will work from home. Well, I'm just not sure we'll get to that fundamental change that is necessary, which is more holistic. It's the context of our lives. It is the big thing that I think this is even underlined even more is that technology is not saving you any time. It's not making you any happier. You are constantly available. I mean, the whole world's on shutdown, and yet everybody's cooped up in a room somewhere, talking into a Teams call. It's not improving our lives. It hasn't given us any more free time. So do we need a much more fundamental reset? I don't know.
Something more, another more fundamental virus to shut us down even more. That's what we need. Is what Mike is exactly what he's saying. But Mike, what is it that we're not seeing? What is it that we're not talking about? What do you, with a kind of totally different mindset to most people that I know, what is out of our field of vision that's coming?
Well, I think one of the consequences. I mean, I think people are talking about this, but that my biggest fear, and it's not my biggest fear for the economy or the country, maybe the biggest fear for the country, is the civil liberties implication of what will come after this. Rushing a vaccine through, that's a frightening prospect in many ways. Vaccinating many young people who don't necessarily need a vaccine is concerning. Thinking about how you're going to be monitored, how you're going to be tagged, how your movements are going to be big brothered. I think all of these things, I think, is it Jeremy Bentham and the concept of the people's behavior changed, the panopticon, if they're watched all the time, the behavior changes. And I think that's quite dynamic amongst populations as well. I think for some people, for many people, and it kind of goes back to the Huxley and the Brave New World view of where we are, is they may embrace that. They may embrace that sort of monitoring, that herding, to use the phrase in a different way. But there's many, many other people, and they're the people that affect change, who are going to find that intolerable. So it took breaking the law to change many of the things that we now take for granted, be it the suffragettes or homosexuality or many of those things. It took people who are prepared to step outside the boundaries. And similarly, the way the way most entrepreneurial people think is to be outside of the mainstream. And I think if we limit that, and I think that is perhaps the thing that worries me most, is we will limit the ability of those people who affect change to do so. And so where will that leave us in a very homogenous world? That's not a world I particularly want to live in.
Mike, well, let me push back on that a little bit, because as you know, if there was anyone who was concerned about the erosion of our civil liberties, restrictions of free speech, that's me. I've been pretty outspoken about this for a long time. But I've got to be honest with you, I look around. I mean, yes, in Australia, they're talking about some kind of app to track your immunity status. And that would be a hill that I'm prepared to die on. I'm not signing up to any fucking app that tracks me around the country. No way. But
if you can't travel, would you?
Right. But this is, yeah. I mean, yeah.
This is exactly my point. If someone said to you, your passport is dependent on you carrying your contact tracing app, then most of us would, and it erodes, doesn't it? So it starts with a contract tracing app. Where does it go after that?
Right. But my broader point, I mean, I take your point on that, and that is a step way too far in my opinion. But more broadly speaking, I do see the a lot of the people we've had on the show who we like and respect kind of, in my opinion, going way off the deep end on this stuff and talking about how we're all under house arrest and all this stuff, which I think is a massive exaggeration. I think a temporary and necessary lockdown is not the same as house arrest. I personally don't feel like Western governments have been overly restrictive about this in proportion to the threat that we're facing. It is a warlike time. You accept a little bit more imposition on your freedoms during that time, provided they're time limited, provided they're specific, provided we can go back to, having a free society afterwards. Do you see signs that that's not going to happen? What's the reason for your concern?
I never trust people in power to give the keys back. Once they get this, similar to the MMT conversation that we had earlier, once you give people in power and consider that their reasons for living or to obtain power, they really don't like giving it back. So while I might not be at the further end of the spectrum of the previous guests you've had, we as a country, as a species, have fought and lost millions of lives to maintain freedoms, and I don't think that should be lost. There are consequences. There's serious consequences to giving up the things that enable us to change. And I think that's what scares me most, is when you have a contact tracing app that you need to have, you've given the political order a lever with which to dictate or with which to demand your obedience. And anything that does that more, I think that would be very, very worrying. And you say you die on a hill for it, but the reality is most people won't.